Hi, Jodi Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and a certified informational privacy professional, and I provide practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hi, Justin Daniels here. I am passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I do that through identifying the problem and coming up with practicable, implementable solutions. I am a cybersecurity subject matter expert and business attorney.
And this episode is brought to you by Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e commerce, digital agencies, professional, and financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there is greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com. And today, I am so excited to welcome Andrew Richardson, who is the SVP of Analytics and Marketing Sciences at Tinuiti, which is the nation's largest independent digital marketing agency across the triopoly of Amazon, Facebook, and Google. Andrew, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. So happy to be here.
Well, we are delighted. Now, before we dive into all things privacy and security and digital advertising, help us understand who is Andrew. So tell us a little bit about how did you find your way to the world of digital and at Tinuiti?
Yeah, I'll go way back. I actually used to be a women's volleyball coach at University of Notre Dame and at UPenn. And when I stopped doing that, I realized that the things that I loved about coaching were actually the numbers and the people. And so I had transitioned over and found a great company. Worked at the College Board for a while and did some educational analytics and had a really great time there, and moved my way into digital marketing by way of a local user group in Philadelphia for the software that I was using at the time called Tableau, which is a great partner of ours. And really just kind of fell in love with this stream of information that was headed my way when I was an analyst, and the ability to take that information and do something with it that actually made sense, as opposed to just looking at numbers on a page. And that was kind of my first foray into digital marketing. Did a little bit of work when I was at the College Board around some of Google Analytics, which was relatively new at the time, and some of their web data. But from there, kind of made my way through the ad tech ecosystem, working at places like Point Roll, and did some pharmaceutical marketing, a place called CMI, some more web design and tracking at a place called Delphic Digital, which is now owned by Hero, and now at Tinuiti, which used to be Elite SEM, where we're doing a whole slew of different things. So you mentioned the triopoly, obviously, but our teams do a lot more with web analytics and data implementation, as well as a lot of work in marketing sciences, and trying to just take, the money that our brands are spending with us and, putting them to their best use possible. So yeah, that's kind of my background.
It's a really fascinating career, starting all the way in volleyball. Who would have thought counting and the measurement from sports would land you to measuring Facebook and Google and Amazon?
Exactly. I know, right? Never would have thought. I remember when I was at UPenn, Facebook just had been coming out, and now to see, oh, you can't log in unless you have a .edu email address, to now being what it is kind of nuts.
So on that stream, help us, you've seen a lot over this period of time. From, obviously we're going to be talking a lot about privacy and security, but kind of think about the evolution of the advertising ecosystem from that personal data. So maybe help explain, where we were and where do we find ourselves today?
Yeah, I think the where we were, if you remember, I vividly remember seeing these ads where you would get like the clapping monkey, um, where like those were ads, right? Those were digital advertisements where someone was trying to get your attention. You would end up with the flashing number advertisements. Usually none of those had anything to do with anything that you actually cared about. If you were 25-year-old, recent college grad, working a $30,000 a year job, you didn't really care about mortgage rates, but those were flashing in your face quite a bit and trying to get you to refinance your mortgage. And so going back from kind of the spray and pray, so to speak, let's throw as much spaghetti against the wall and get as much reach as we can, was kind of the mentality, I think, of old, broadcast media, where we knew kind of what the demographic was of people in certain markets based off of market research. And we would then go out and try and just advertise to as many people within those different markets as possible. Now, obviously, with the rise of so much more data collection, I think the pixel in general and its development and what you've been able to do with a very simple, piece of technology, really at its core, has obviously transformed into being able to do a lot more than just clapping monkeys and flashing numbers on a page from a display advertising perspective. Being able to move into having compelling creative that, as we talk about, hits someone at the right place at the right time with the right message. It's been quite a transformation, and now obviously looking towards the future and the deprecation of cookies, and how are we going to measure the things that we've been able to measure for so long, and what does it mean? And obviously with privacy being at the forefront of that. And I think it's just been a big shift from my early days of advertising and what we were doing.
So many interesting nuggets and everything that you just shared. Let's help explain the cookieless and kind of this new frontier that we're expecting to have. And so, kind of, can you explain what that is, when we think it might really make a splash and an impact? And then, what should companies be doing? So, you kind of had talked about first party data. What might be some tactical suggestions? Maybe a company hasn't been focused on that as much, what they should be doing now.
Yeah, I think that a couple of things that I would highlight. One, from just to orient people, a cookie, right? And what is a cookie is really just a small text file that sits in the browser that then websites can write data to. Sometimes it's specific to a device, or it is specific to a device. And cookies have been around since the mid 90s, really. And the initial goal of those was kind of improving the e-commerce experience. There's different types of cookies. So first party cookies would be ones that are kind of created and published and controlled by the website that you visit, and help with things like, I remember what was in your shopping cart, and I know what items you viewed, and different preferences that kind of improve the user experience within, working with that brand, right? They get that behavioral data to help kind of the website owner improve services, and it only goes back to the owner of that domain. So first party cookies and the data collected only go back to the brand in which you're engaging with. Third party cookies are ones that are set by third party servers. Ad technology usually is where we think about this. So that's a code, another piece of code that's placed on the web domain by the owner of that domain, but the data that's collected there is accessible on any website that loads that third party server's code. So that allows advertisers to track users across the internet and kind of target advertising wherever that user goes, right? So thinking of cookies in that way within the e-commerce landscape, I think, is probably the most applicable way to think about this. We obviously use them for ad targeting. You come visit, brand.com, you look at a specific, let's say, pair of shoes, and then, hours or days later, you're getting retargeted with an advertisement about that brand or about those shoes, right? That information is going away, specifically as it pertains to third-party cookies and their ability to be able to still leverage that data to do those things. So from an impact perspective, and when it happens, we know that in 2021 that this is going to happen. The exact dates of certain things are still yet to be determined. Like I mentioned, there's things happening in the Apple ecosystem with Safari and with some of the ways that they're tracking apps. Facebook is changing some of the ways that they actually do like the attribution of marketing as a result of some of this. But there is a lot of shakeup that's going to come if you're a marketer who's used to relying on retargeting for people that have come to your website and leveraging those third-party cookies as a result of that. Some browsers that are already out there, Brave, Firefox, Safari, they already block a lot of the third-party cookies, and Chrome has actually also announced that they're deprecating third-party cookies this year. That change on the Chrome side, because Chromium specifically is the underlying technology of Chrome, is the largest reach of any of the web browsers out there. That will make a massive, massive dent within the industry and third-party cookies in that result. Yeah.
So you talked about all this being a byproduct of a shakeup. And when you mean shakeup, I interpreted that to mean a lot of what's going on in Washington, D.C. from the Democrats and Republicans and what's gone on with big tech. Is that what you're referring to, or can you kind of give us some further color about that?
Yeah, I think that for me, this goes back actually to the fallout of the Cambridge Analytica kind of data controversy. I go back then a little more recently to GDPR in Europe and CCPA in California, and just the legislation that has now started to come to the forefront. All of the antitrust kind of aside, I think this started before that, but has started to bring that more and more because of the antitrust hearings to the forefront of a lot more kind of everyday consumers' minds. And I think that it's good for consumers and for companies that this is happening. I am consumer focused, even though I work for a marketing technology marketing company, and we know at Tinuiti how important consumer privacy is. But I think this is a good thing. It's just a big shakeup for how, since the 90s, effectively, the advertising ecosystem has operated, and some of the things that folks in marketing are used to being able to do changes as a result.
How do you see consumer habits changing? And you had mentioned that you see a lot of consumer privacy focused brands that you're working with all the time. What do you see kind of between the consumer focused brands, right? Why do they put privacy first? And how does that connect with the consumer habits and any changes that you're starting to see?
The way that I think about this is that for many consumers, and there's research out there that's been done on this. I think when we started to see newspapers digitally needing to charge for subscriptions, but then people thinking about what alternatives are there to charging for subscriptions. Well, would you give me some of your personal information so that then I can give you this thing for free? And I think that there's always that play of give and take with privacy and with personal data, to how much you're willing to give up for getting something in return. And we think about that. Let's just think about location, right? Is a very real one today, where browsers are asking to know your location, apps on your phone are asking to know your location. And depending on how much you want to give up or not, I think it really depends on, from a marketing lens, what is the give that I'm giving back to consumers in order to take something from them from their personal, what they may consider private data. And so I think that the top marketers out there are really trying to explain what the value is of some of these things. Even just going to things like cookie consent banners, right, on websites, you see a lot more of them getting a lot more detailed, because I think when GDPR first happened specifically, they were pretty sparse. Cookies, yes or no, here's why, maybe a privacy control center if you were lucky. But now they're getting a lot more detail, because I think they've seen a drop off in a lot of that data, and they're saying, well, we have some necessary cookies. Are you okay if we just have the necessary cookies? Yes or no? Advertising cookies, do you want the, like, they're giving users a lot more choice and a lot more information to determine, is my personal information and data valuable enough to give away for what I get in return? Great marketers are making that a focal point. You give me this, I give you that, right? It's not just, I expect you to give me everything and you get nothing in return.
Makes sense.
It's interesting that we bring up these points. You talk about geolocation because Jodi convinced me to get a new car last year. I got a Telluride, and I actually turned off the function on my phone that geolocates me. So then my car was so kind to say, "Hey, the Apple Maps function will do better if you turn this on." And I'm like, "No." So I think I'm good. But then, of course, Kia has a map on my car that shows exactly where I'm going because of the sensors. And then, as Jodi's going to laugh in a minute, in San Diego, they have drones that fly up in the sky that are monitoring where traffic and whatnot is going. And so I'm sharing this story in a way because all of those different forms of geolocation impact our privacy. And so I'd love to get your take on how you see companies in your space and your customers dealing with privacy, because it comes in so many different forms now with all of the data that's out there that's being collected by all these different devices. Love to get your take on that.
Yeah, just a quick aside. I was at a conference. This was now obviously pre-COVID, so it was probably 2 years ago now. And one of the speakers was the head of data for one of the top 5 car manufacturers in the country. They were collecting more data in a day, because of all of the different sensors and devices, like you just mentioned, that are in automobiles, than they had collected as an entire company in the previous like 15 years, right? One day, 15 years. And so I bring that up, and you were talking about cars, because I think that oftentimes consumers don't really understand how much is being tracked about them. And I don't know that they understand what the implications are of them being tracked or not being tracked. Again, Apple Maps does better tracking you if you're looking for GPS directions. You should turn it on if you actually want to know where you're going. There's a very clear give and take there. What may not be understood pre some of the changes that are happening within the app ecosystem is there additional data that is being tracked as a part of this? Not just you have my location so that then you can tell me where I need to go, but what additional information and data are you actually collecting and using this for? So going back to my point of marketers need to be very clear about what they do with this data beyond just it gives you a personalized web experience, quote unquote. I feel like that's a generic statement that you see in a lot of cookie consent banners, is in order to give you the most personalized experience, you should enable everything that I'm asking you to enable. That can be fine for some brands, but not for others. And so I think that in order for brands to really be considered privacy focused, it can't just be about our data centers are, this, and we care about consumer privacy. They really need to be explaining what that means to them. What is my data privacy worth? What are you doing with that data? What are you not doing with that data? And can't give away trade secrets, obviously, but the ability to still track users, but with their consent, and explain what they're getting as a result of being able to track this data is important. I also think on the flip side of that, to a degree, because of how much we've had users or how much consumers are used to being tracked, when some of this tracking goes away, we're going to end up with a worse experience as consumers. And I don't think we understand what that means either. Some people may not care. But one that I can tell you for me is impactful. This just happened to me a couple of weeks ago. I was on a website. I was browsing for some clothing items, added them to my cart. Didn't sign in on the website, but added them to my cart. And I use a browser that anytime I leave after there's inactivity, it clears my cache. I went back to the website. Those items were no longer in my cart. And I was like, what the heck? These things aren't in my cart anymore. I don't understand. Well, that's of course what would happen. Like the data was no longer being collected because I had expired out the time window. I hadn't expired these items can only stay in your cart for 2 hours because they might go out of stock. This was an entirely different thing. And so I think that we're going to see some of that at the same time where, yeah, I'm not going to get the same user experience. I think my conversion rates, if I'm a marketer, will probably go down as a result of not being able to make, frictionless conversion paths, so to speak, for for consumers, and it's going to be an interesting thing to navigate along the way.
Go ahead.
So it's funny you said that. So in another way, you're saying, as we rebalance towards more privacy and respecting it, how much inefficiency are we willing to put up with? Because in my experience, when it comes to having the best experience or the most efficiency with technology, it beats the pants off of privacy and security every time. And now you're really talking about rebalancing that seesaw.
Yeah, you're exactly correct. And how far it balances, like that's the one thing. It's there's no relative measure to how far out of balance we are right now. Right? It's just been a constant thing where we've gone up and up and up and up. And like what there is, what's the diminishing return point here that we actually see? We don't know. So let's say a lot of companies, I'll use as an example, they rely on abandoned cart emails, right? That doesn't necessarily go away because that's a logged in experience. And so if you're a logged in consumer, you still have that. But to your point, if I want to be not inconvenienced, I may want to be able to say, yep, I'm going to just go ahead and turn on that you can track me for this stuff, because the lack of convenience is actually worth it for me. That's part of the give and take that I was talking about.
There are some brands out there that have figured out how to do abandoned cart emails without being logged in, because I know that they are relying on my cookies and I was not logged in to buy the item. And yet I, 1 hour later, did not buy the XYZ item. I'm being very kind to this brand, but I know who they are. Big, well-known brand. And they are always targeting me to keep buying whatever it is. I did not choose to buy at that time. But you had mentioned something really interesting around how marketers need to consider these privacy items, when they're explaining to consumers. And one of the questions I'm always asked is, where does privacy sit? Who owns privacy? Who's responsible for privacy? When you're working with clients, who do you tend to discuss these types of privacy items with? Is it marketers? Do their privacy teams get involved? Or are they lawyers? Are they, business people? It would be interesting to hear, I think, for people to understand where privacy sits amongst companies.
For us at Tinuiti, it varies. And I say that because we work with clients that are small to medium business, and we work with clients that are Fortune 100 companies. And so it varies to an extent there. I'll give that caveat. In the companies that are, Fortune 100, they have privacy teams, right? That are focused on thinking about marketing and privacy therein. They are very closely tied with or have on those teams legal, folks as well that are talking through the implications of different things that happen within the way they collect data, their website operations, how they are in compliance with GDPR, CCPA regulations. So it can vary there. The majority of the conversations we have are with marketers, and the way that I think about this is actually a little different than pre GDPR world, where pre GDPR you would go and talk to a client about privacy, and you would kind of get the like eyes glazed over look because, well, like there was no regulation that said I had to do something here, with the exception of email, right? Canned spam and all of those types of things that came along. Now I see more and more on the rise of companies either building or outsourcing to be able to have privacy groups within their org. Right now, I think a lot of that responsibility sits within marketing. This is where we are collecting the data, right? It's not IT, it's not InfoSec. That has a play into what we're talking about, but I think that the marketing privacy is in many, many ways, especially at large brands, very, very different than how their InfoSec or IT teams are thinking. They will not have the working understanding of the way that the technologies work or how the data is being collected. And oftentimes, frankly, the marketers don't know that either. They've bought a tool because it solves a problem, but they don't understand all of the things that are happening. There was a great article recently that came out from Ghostery, and Ghostery does their tracking the trackers thing every single year. And I encourage everyone to go take a look at that, because it's a really fascinating look at to which brands from a third party perspective are tracking the most. Where do you see the most cookies and pixels And it's the triopoly, right? It's Amazon and Facebook and Google, but then you end up with, Twitter, and you see Microsoft and Comscore and Cloudflare and Adobe and Criteo, and you look at that, and some people might say, "I've never what is a Criteo?" Right? Like I don't even know what that is. Comscore, I feel like I may have heard that, but I don't know what it is either. So I think that we rely on the marketers to have this understanding, but oftentimes they don't. They are just trying to solve a problem with a tool or a solution or a cookie in whatever case it is. And so I think that there's a lot of responsibility that falls on them. I will also say, working at a technology enabled marketing services company or agency like we are, it's our responsibility to do a lot of that education. If you were to go to our website and just search for privacy or cookie, you'll see a lot of educational materials that we've put out for our brands and for the market in general, because we think that privacy is hugely important to the success of our brands. We care about, like I said earlier, consumers and their privacy. And so there's still a gap, though. There's definitely still a gap in what exists within a lot of brands and their understanding of data privacy and what they need to do about it, and who's ultimately responsible for making sure that they're all compliant.
I love the reference to the Ghostery report. And if anyone has also not already downloaded, Ghostery has an amazing plugin that you can put on your browser, and you can kind of have it set up to auto block or allow, but then you can choose and you can see all the trackers that are happening on a site at that time. It's a free, really great plugin. So I highly recommend that you grab that. Well, I think we could chat for hours on all kinds of topics. So we kind of always ask everyone, given everything you've learned from the knowledge that you have in a privacy and security sense, what's the best privacy tip that you would offer our listeners?
Best privacy tip to offer your listeners. I think the number one thing that I would probably say is, recently did this. Go through your phone and take a look at the apps that you have on there, and go through each of them to see if you've got certain data collection components turned on or not. The location one is one for me that I turn off every single location piece that I possibly can, because I don't feel like I need that to happen as part of the apps that I work in. Where I need location, I have it enabled. Where I don't. So that's probably one of the biggest ones for me, because again, you don't know what you don't know. And so we're making assumptions that just because we have an app, there's certain data that's going to be passed back. It could be more than what you think. So I definitely would take a look at that.
It's a great tip. Good reminder.
So our last question, but not least, is what do you like to do for fun besides coach sports?
So I don't coach sports anymore, which is a whole different conversation for another time. Still love sports. I live in Philadelphia. I'm a big Eagles and Sixers and Phillies fan. I've got two kids, one in high school and one getting ready to go into middle school this next year, and my wife. And so we spend a lot of time together, especially during COVID. We have played a whole heck of a lot of Uno last year, literally every single day from like March to June, probably. We would be playing Uno after dinner every single day. So that was a lot of fun. We have not picked up Uno in quite a while because that got a little bit too much. But we love board games and games in general. And so we spend a lot of time together doing that. It's a really interesting question in the midst of this pandemic, because the pre-pandemic answers are going to be completely different, I feel like, for anyone who answers that question than where we currently sit.
Well, some people got dogs in COVID. We started a podcast. So I guess when we get out of
Perfect.
the pandemic, it'll be very interesting to compare the answers. We'll come to you for some analytical help.
I love it.
Well, Andrew, thank you so much for your time. Where can people connect with you to learn more and stay in touch?
Yeah. So LinkedIn, obviously, Andrew Richardson, I think on there, it's Analytic Andrew, which is actually also my Twitter handle. And then through our website, check us out, tinuiti.com, Tinuiti. And we'd love to have conversations with you all if you're a brand that's, looking for some help, because we know this is not an easy thing to navigate. So.
Well, wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise with us today. It was a really fascinating discussion, and we appreciate it.
Thank you, guys. Appreciate the time.